he's not a serial killer per se. He just killed his father's fiance. But he's interesting to me because he's 11 years old. He's 11 years old. He's obviously from a broken home. Parents are probably divorced, or perhaps they were never even married, being raised by his father. And, perhaps he was used to getting 100% of the attention, which makes sense, right? That makes sense. But how bad did it have to be for him to get jealous of his stepsisters and the yet to be born baby, right? How in his mind did he put together that he could solve his problem by killing Kinsey Hauk? That would get, I think, in his mind, wouldn't you think he would surmise that if I can get rid of her, I'll get rid of the baby and I'll get rid of those stepsisters and it'll just be me and dad again. And that is an innocent way of looking at things. I have no doubt that there are children who are in similar situations who have said, if you would just go away, if you would just leave, our life would go back to normal. But as a mature adult and who has, some life experiences behind her, and you as well, typically, that it's not the way it works. That is not the way it works. People change. You've got to be flexible. You may not like decisions that people make, but, certainly if it's not your life, you don't have a right to those decisions. This kid's 11 years old. And instead of just saying, if I can get rid of her, my life will go back to normal, he takes that one step further, gets his gun, and kills the fiancée while she's in bed asleep. It's not even like it was an act of rage. It wasn't an accident or he wasn't thinking. It was planned out. He had to think about that. I'm going to go, she's asleep in bed. I'm going to go get, my dad's not here. I'm going to go get my gun that my dad gave me and I'm going to shoot her. And then hide the weapon. It doesn't say that in this article, but I know, they found that gun just based on police reports, the way they write them up. The gun was not out in plain view. He had hidden that gun. So he knew the consequences. Maybe not specific consequences, but he knew what he had done was wrong. So he hid the gun in hopes that they wouldn't find the gun. And of course, if you don't have a weapon, if you don't find the weapon, it's very difficult to get a guilty verdict because there's too much circumstantial evidence, which of course we know in 2018 he was exonerated. I have mixed feelings about that. I do believe his immaturity as an 11-year-old should have certainly been considered. And I think they did consider it to some degree. I think that what we know, this was 2009. We had video games then, right? What we know now about the influence of very violent video games, sexually provocative video games, how that influences this rapidly growing brain. Their development can be really I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to. It will literally stunt the growth of their brain. It will change it in ways that we can't even explain. I wish we could. There is an idea that there's a serial killer gene. In this particular case, he's not a serial killer. And to my knowledge, if he's been out of jail since 2018, he's not gotten in trouble. I think we have to consider with these juveniles how different Jordan's case is from Starkweather or Jesse, the first one that we talked about. Jesse, in my mind, is an evil human being. He's evil. He was evil. Then you have Starkweather, who I think was just a very unhappy, angry human being who decided after, a lifetime of feeling inadequate, probably struggling to just survive, that he just snapped and lashed out and then continued it because he really got off on the power. Many times serial killers will say, or violent offenders will say, it's that there's like no other feeling of power like killing a person, watching their very last breath being taken. Some have even said that it's like watching their soul leave their body. And that's the ultimate power, isn't it? I mean, as a Christian, I believe God is the ultimate power and that He is the only one who has the right to take a life. And that's not murder in this case, but it's, He is the Almighty God. So He is the one who knows when we're going to die. He knows what our life's going to be like, all those things. That's my belief. But if you have someone who has these, numerous disorders, psychosocial behavior, and psychopathic tendencies, all those things, they're going to have a very skewed understanding of what is appropriate and what is not. And I hesitate to say normal because what is normal? We literally talked about this in class yesterday. The slide that was on the PowerPoint in the chapter that we're working on was a bell curve. And, where normalcy is, quote unquote, is in the highest point of the bell curve. And you've got to the right of the bell curve is going to be your higher achievers. To the left of the bell curve is going to be your below average students. And we're saying they're below average or above average based on that normalcy score. And that's what we use for standardized tests, right? Whether you realize it or not, that is what, when we were in school and we took all those standardized tests, they were determining if we fell within that average range, or were we above average, or were we below average. And when I was growing up, they would put us in, they would group us. We had an advanced class, we had an average class, and then we had I don't know what you would call it, but we knew who was in each of the classes, right? I was in the advanced class. In high school, we had, pre-college classes. And you knew, without anyone telling you, where those people fell in the categorization. And you also knew what some of their characteristics were that put them there. And a lot of that's socioeconomic, status, learning delays, any kind of physical issue that you may have. It can put you in different categories, whether we mean to as educators or not. We still categorize students, even though we have an inclusive classroom. We still say, for peer tutoring, you're going to put a higher functioning student with a lower functioning student, let them do peer tutoring. You've categorized them. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying we do that in society. Where did Jordan fall in this? I believe, I would consider his family a middle class family. Not traditional, not normal, but it is normal for today, right? And I think it was probably normal, somewhat more prevalent then than it is now. I mean, than it was prior. Now there is no normal. We talk about normal. Used to be normal was a family of 4, or, two parents, 2.5 children, and a fourth of a dog, right? That's kind of my joke. But that's what the government statistics would tell us. That's the average family. So anything beyond that, maybe you have 6 kids instead, and a dog and a cat and a farm full of animals. You're far above average, maybe not intelligence-wise, but you're so extraordinarily different from the average family, right? Or maybe instead of being that 2-parent home, heterosexual with, a boy and a girl and, fourth of the dog, you are a lesbian couple. So there's 2 mothers, you have 2 or 3 children, maybe one is adopted, and you have a snake as a pet. It's not that picture perfect family that we used to have all these shows about, like Leave It to Beaver, right? That's probably one of the most commonality shows that you can ever watch. It's like Happy Days, You don't see a lot of shows like that anymore. The Cosby Show, but that's not the average family. Yes, it had that same structure: 2 parents, 3 children, 4 children, but it was an African American family, first of all, very different. Second of all, they were very affluent because he was an OBGYN and she was an attorney. So that was a lifestyle that we hadn't seen very often. It just was not represented in culture, our society. It happens every day, but it just wasn't the norm. And that's one reason that these shows were so successful. So when you're trying to say that, where would these serial killers, where would these violent offenders fall on that normalcy scale or that Bell chart? Would they be considered normal? What about them stood out, made them different? Those are all the things that we look at in human development. For me, specifically, early childhood development. What was normal about it? What wasn't normal about it? What is normal to me is not normal to you. Perhaps I grew up in that cookie cutter family. I have the mother and the father and my brother, older brother, younger. I'm the youngest, and I was a girl, and we had a dog, and we also lived on a farm. For us, that was our normal. But I had friends whose parents were divorced, and every other weekend they went to the opposite parent's house that had them, right? We see that it's so common now that we don't think anything about it. But years and years and years and years and years ago, it was not the norm. You just didn't see that happening. So when we talk about what's normal, even in this context, you're going to really have to consider that family unit. He's coming from a single family, Jordan coming from a single parent home. There is no mention of his mother that I can find. But it still lists his father as his only family member. And this is kind of crazy to think about, but he was released in 2018. So he's out in the world today living his life. And as of late, we know, the latest that I know, is he is a college junior and he's studying computer science. And he has repeatedly stated in interviews that he suffers from PTSD, but he is committed to turning his life around. Who am I to say he doesn't have PTSD? I think going through that experience, especially if he says he's innocent, and perhaps maybe he is innocent. There are some theories running around out there. One of the theories is